And you're listening to the Brown Perspective. And today we're talking about the Super Bowl. We're having a follow up conversation about our predictions for the Super Bowl. And I know Herrero wants an opportunity to once again talk smack against the greatest of them all, the GOAT, Tom Brady, the seventh time champion, Super Bowl champion in the
I
world.
get another opportunity to hate.
I hear you. Pero ¿qué te dije? ¿Qué te dije? That the Tampa Bay defense had to show up in order for the team to become the reigning champions.
Oh yeah, and they shut down Mahomes and the Chiefs. I was impressed at how they were able to neutralize him, and how lopsided this victory was. And let me clarify something regarding what I said last week about not wanting Brady to win. It wasn't a personal jab at Brady. What I was trying to say is that human beings don't know how to behave themselves around people that win consistently, like a Brady.
Yeah.
And they get crazy, and then they start saying all these outrageous things. Like, it's in a few years you're gonna hear it. You may not hear it even if it's not being said right now.
I think you're hearing it now, but probably
You
not.
are.
It's
I,
not as broadly understood.
I think you're the only one of my friends that is a huge Patriots fan. Because remember, I grew up on the West Coast, so we're all 49er fans. And then the other ones that are not 49er fans, they're Raider fans or Rams fans or Chargers fans. So
Yeah.
all of those guys were probably hating on Brady. So I didn't hear much from them, and I don't really tune into ESPN these days.
And can I just point out the irony? Because Tom Brady grew up in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
He was a 49ers fan. He would have loved to play at the 49ers. And actually, I think there was the opportunity
Yeah,
for
there
him to
was.
potentially work there, but he didn't. He wasn't chosen. So,
My
yeah,
cousins, my cousins remind me of that every chance they get.
what could have been the one that got away, Herrero, the
Yeah.
one that got
Yeah.
away.
So it wasn't, I'm not hating on Brady. I don't like the environment that it creates. Like when people talk about Jordan and about like the greatest, the GOAT, the greatest of all time. I don't like that atmosphere. But
Yeah.
yeah, so from what I saw in the game, there was just a dominant performance from the Buccaneers. And so, yeah, they deserve to win. But why don't we talk a little bit about the other storylines that have emerged in the aftermath of this win?
Yeah, so I think, and actually leading up to the Super Bowl, so I know that diversity is very important, or is a growing issue, particularly after the summer of 2020. So I know that in the running and the lead up to the Super Bowl, there was a lot of attention to the fact that the Buccaneers have three black coordinators and two female coaches. And well, I think more importantly, the highlight being that there's not that many black coaches in a league that's predominantly African American, right? Some of the best players are African American, so that disconnect between the players and the coaching staff is pretty clear. And to just highlight the irony that a white Republican Trump supporter quarterback in some ways played for a team that's probably one of the most diverse in terms of coaching staff, and perhaps one of the reasons why they won. But I think why the reason that there's so much talk now is also that there were a number of head coaching positions available this season, and unfortunately, none of these assistant coaches got the opportunity to be appointed head coach.
Have those positions been filled already?
They have, and some with some controversial figures. One of them being Urban Meyer up in Jacksonville, and some controversy around him wanting to bring a coach who had been accused of being a racist and bully against some of his African American players back in, I think it was Iowa State, if I'm not mistaken.
And all those positions were filled after the Super Bowl?
I think in the lead up, because I believe right after the season's over, I think
Yeah.
most teams start making decisions in coaching, right? If you had a really terrible season, you're let go,
Hmm.
and then they're starting to think to put their teams together for the next season. And the sooner you have a head coach,
Yeah.
the better you can, put your team. So I think a good amount of them do. I don't know if there's still more hiring moves that can be made. I'm sure they can, but maybe not as many as before the Super Bowl.
Yeah, because these three black assistant coaches, their stock went up after the win. So now they're more attractive. So I would think that they would get offers going forward. So I'm willing to say that they might get offers. But
Yeah.
again, let's wait and see.
Yeah, and you make a good point because I think they did interview, and I guess they did interview before getting to the Super Bowl and before winning the Super Bowl. So I think that I'm sure that there's some teams that regret the fact that they didn't hire them. But to your point, they did it. They hadn't won the Super Bowl yet, so they needed to prove themselves, and now they're, I'm sure, hot commodities for those teams who need a leader. But now it's kind of hard, right? Because you already hired your top coach, so you're not gonna let him go, and now you're gonna have to wait at least a season or two before you can hire another head coach.
Yeah, probably in the beginning of the season when a few teams start off with 0-3 or 0-4, and they need to make a move to change the coach, and then that's when you might see that these guys get a job. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they don't get any offers. After all, Colin Kaepernick still doesn't have a job, even as a backup quarterback, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, and speaking of him, I think my understanding is that the 49ers still owe him some money, and I would suggest to the 49er organization to pay that debt, so that way that some of that bad juju can go away, and hopefully you all can get to your winning ways, and Kaepernick can be hired in other teams, because I understand that the Broncos wanted to hire him but pay him a lot less, and he wasn't willing to lose. I forfeit, I believe they still owe him like $7 million. And I think he would have had to forfeit his contract with the 49ers in order to take a new job. So all that to say that I think 49er Nation, encourage your folks to figure all that out, so you can move on and let Kaepernick move on too.
Yeah, and one more point on Kaepernick. What's so frustrating about him is that in 10 years or in 20 years, he's going to be held as such an important figure during this times, and even the NFL at that point is going to issue statements or apologies, and they'll say that they were wrong. I mean, we all know that's coming, yet they refuse to do the right thing right now when he still has a few years left in him where he could be out there competing. So that's just unfortunate. But tying that back to the discussion here about the black head coaches or these assistant coaches that could potentially get offers as head coaches, I'm sure there's barriers there for black qualified candidates to become head coaches. No different than it is for, say, or we know about the challenges that black quarterbacks have had in the past, where they performed and they proved themselves, or they were just discarded. They weren't kept around as second stringers, as third stringers, waiting to step into an opportunity. And that's something that I've heard former black quarterbacks complain about. So we know that happens. But I'm not as aware with the dynamics of the head coach position. Like what are the politics at play? What's going on there? How are they effectively blocking, and what are the justifications that they would make, considering that there's so many ex-players that are talented. At this point there's so many that are involved with the NFL in different capacities, right? So there's a big pool to choose from, yet there is not representative, considering how many the percentage of the NFL that's made up of black athletes.
Yes, good point. And I think I would like to take this opportunity to tell our listeners that part of the reason we call this show The Brown Perspective is not just because we talk about issues from a Latino perspective, but also because Herreo and I went to Brown University. And I wanted to point out the fact that actually the first African-American NFL head coach was a Brown alum, Fritz Pollard. Or Frederick Douglass Pollard was one of the first coaches in the NFL. And I know that he was a very formidable football player. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that little tie and connection that Brown University has to diversity within the NFL.
Nice. I like it with the Brown University trivia there.
That's right. Ever true, baby. Ever true. In terms of I think the fact that that yeah, that you have so many talented black players who somehow don't get to be coaches is crazy. And then I think going back just or mentioning, I know that there's a former football player, Emmanuel Acho, I believe,
Hmm.
who has this amazing series of videos called "Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man,"
Yeah.
and I know that one of his latest ones was a conversation with Goodell, the commissioner of the league, and and I guess sort of seeing the evolution of the league and of Goodell himself, whose father I didn't realize was a New York politician and senator, so who was supportive and involved both in the civil rights movement, and you'll like this, against also against the Vietnam War at the time.
Nice. You should like that too, man. You should be against war too.
I know, yeah, I don't like war. War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing.
That makes a
But I
profit.
just know that you and I have a differentiation or a difference, a light difference. Like I'm not a war, but I understand where the desire to be a dominant force in the world comes from. And I know it's
Yeah.
pretty toxic.
Yeah, let's save that conversation for another episode. So, the other thing when it comes to black athletes and black coaches, and especially black coaches winning the Super Bowl, this article is still highlighting that big problem because the
Yeah.
headline is Tampa Bay Super Bowl win buried the myth that only white men can coach the NFL.
Hmm.
So I would have thought that by now we would have been over this, but it looks like we're not. And I don't like these type of discussions where at least where they center around this, and then people get excited that this has been disproven, because it's hard for me to say whether or not people actually internalize this and believed it, and they're so happy that here's evidence to show that it's not true, so they can then correct their own behavior,
Hmm.
or
Yeah, that they weren't able to, that they weren't qualified, that they weren't capable of doing that until they prove it.
yeah. So there's a big difference, right? Whether or not somebody has internalized that a black coach or assistant coaches are not capable, and then you're looking for evidence to then help you stop believing that. Whereas my take is, no, that's nonsense. Of course they're capable. They've always been capable.
Yeah,
It's
they
just
just
they've
haven't been given the opportunity
yeah, they
to
haven't
show
been
you that
given
they
the
can.
opportunity. But I do get the sense that because of the way that the Eurocentrism, the way that people have grown up in this society, I do feel that a lot of people have internalized that way of thinking, where they actually do believe that non-white coaches can't win, and then they need that proof. They need that win so much, and that's why they get so happy when finally a black coach wins. I mean, when the first black coach, how many years ago was it that a black coach won the Super Bowl?
Well, I think it was
The
Tony Dungy, and then there was the coach from the Steelers too,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Tom.
think that those were at least the last two that I remember, and I just
Mm,
I just remember thinking like, so what? Yeah, it's good, but my thinking was, okay, it's about time. So you get enough black coaches in there, of course they're going to win. But it
yeah,
wasn't nothing beyond that, like not a celebration to say yes, yes, we've proven that we can do it. It's like, no, dude, don't argue for that. I mean, we've always been able to do that. Just
yeah.
so yeah,
Well,
so that's why whenever I see headlines like this one, I always think about that.
well, to your point, I think that's because their minds had been colonized, my brother. So colonization was a hell of a, you know, I mean, before there was race, or actually racism, colonization, and all that stuff goes hand in hand, and one was used to perpetuate the other. So in some ways, our minds have been colonized, and here in the U.S. and Latin America and across the world. But um, but I think that that change is coming, and unfortunately, there are people who do believe that. So when you see proof and you show that you saw these examples of how successful black people can be, how successful brown people can be, Asians, Native Americans, etc. That these proves, and sometimes, and you're right, it sucks that it somehow you need that type of storyline, and the fact that you also need to almost be perfect, right? You need to be either the best at something, very disciplined, not making any mistakes, and you have to live up to that standard in order for your humanity to be acknowledged. And when you also realize there's a lot of us who are not perfect, who make mistakes, and unfortunately the system is not very forgiving or supportive of them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The whole issue with second chances. If
Mm-hmm.
you are a teenager and you make some dumb mistake, if you're black or Hispanic, that may cost you your entire life. Meaning that you may end up in prison or you may end up tarnishing your future prospects. But if you're white, you get a lot more second chances because the assumption is that you're just a teenager and you made an honest mistake. Whereas if you're non-white, the assumption is that, oh, you were out there looking for trouble because it's built into you. That's who you are by nature. So yeah, these things are they're pervasive, and they're insidious because they affect people in a lot of ways. And a lot of the times, people aren't even aware that they're being harmed by this way of thinking, that on an individual level, on a societal level. So hopefully people can just realize that of course there can be black coaches, and of course they can win Super Bowls, and of course a black coach can win 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 Super Bowls in a row. Of course it can happen. It's just,
Of course.
just put me in, coach, as you say.
Put me in, coach. I can do it.
Yeah.
And also to point out that the other interesting thing about whether it's college football or the NFL, that once you make it to those leagues, I know that the other element is how much of a, because you're a star athlete, how much you can get away with, or how much the system protects you, right? And I know that, thinking about the Hernandez story,
Mm-hmm.
and about how he was protected in Miami and all those things, that
Oh
I think
yeah.
there's also a lot of unhealthy things within football culture, and well, football culture, both at the college level, at the national level, that by having more diversity, by having more black coaches, by having women coaches, by also, I know the other big frontier within the NFL is LGBT rights, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's plenty of gay NFL players who don't feel comfortable coming out because of how toxic an environment that is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think little by little, as the league becomes more diversified at the top, and also, I mean, we're talking about coaches. I don't believe there's a black owner of a team yet. So
Yeah.
right, so like little by little, we're making progress towards having a better league, and I think once we get there, I think we'll also be having a better society as well.
Yeah. Just in closing, with Aaron Hernandez, I think it's a slightly different dynamic. I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. Whereas, meaning that the powerful will protect their own, and so that's
Yeah.
what you were seeing there. Once you get into a behind a gated community of power, then that power is going to protect you if it's in their interest to do so. So
If you continue to win
yeah,
Super
exactly right.
Bowls.
Otherwise, they'll discard you. So that's slightly off topic, but I just wanted to mention that.
Hmm.
All right, I think this wraps it up. Any parting words before we close it up?
Yes, I think that it will be interesting to see. To your point, Brady did win it, and all indications are that he's going to come back next year to play again. So we'll see if he can pull it one more time, right? And now you have a team that's proven it, that can do it. And I think that the culture, you can tell how the winning culture has changed. So we'll see. It will be interesting whether or not he and the team are able to pull it off, and then also see how the Mahomes recovers from this defeat and some of the other teams. So I think, and the other interesting thing that we kind of forgot too, that this happened during the pandemic, and
Mm-hmm.
there's still people who are dying from COVID, and I think the 2021 Super Bowl will be, well, I guess 2022, right? Technically,
Mm-hmm.
Super Bowl will be an interesting feature, and actually it's going to happen here in LA. So, Reo, regardless of who
Mm-hmm.
gets to the big game, you and I should be at SoFi Stadium enjoying the Super Bowl and enjoying the whole week. I'll take the whole week off to enjoy the Super Bowl party here in LA.
Let's do it. And if it's Brady
Puro
there, I'll be
pinche
cheering
party.
against him.
Huh?
Let's do it. And if it's Brady that makes it to the Super Bowl, I'll be cheering against him.
Brady and the Niners meet again in the final.
All right. For those of you out there listening, if you enjoy our content, make sure to check us out. We are The Brown Perspective on YouTube. We're also on Twitter and Instagram. Nos vemos.
Ciao.